Hello, friend, and welcome back to episode 8 of my 31-day challenge, where I'm answering your questions about creating a career or a business that you love. In today's episode, I'm answering a question which is kind of a follow-up to episode 2, which is all about finding clients and the reasons why a client might be interested. And in that episode, we talked about how to reach out to clients using a cold email formula, which has been amazing to hear the feedback already from people saying that that email template has already landed them work. So just that, that 20-minute free podcast that I've put out into the universe has already made people money, which is very, very exciting. But one of the kind of follow-ups that I'm hearing is people asking, once I've got the person to kind of reply and say, yes, I want to discuss this further, or I'm interested, I want to hear more, how do you move that client from being just someone who's interested, or what we call a warm lead in business, to actually making them a client and making the sale? So that's what we're talking about in this episode. If you've got a question, reach out to me on any of the social medias. The handle is AlexMakesVR. If you've got a longer question, reach out to me on email, alexmakesvr@gmail.com. And if you want to be notified when these episodes go live, you can sign up to the daily newsletter at alexmakesvr.com, where I send out a reminder every day when it goes live, but also giving you a bit of a summary about what I talk about in that episode. So let's dive in, shall we? So the $1 million question. How do you turn someone that is slightly interested or curious or vaguely kind of thinks that 360 in VR might be a solution for them? Like, how do you turn them from that into someone that gives you their cold, hard cash and becomes a client of yours? Well, there's a few different factors in this, and this kind of part of the equation is a little bit less formulaic than the previous episode where we talked about, an actual strategy about how to actually get someone to reply to your emails, or how to kind of make it appealing and how to sell someone on the idea of 360 VR. This bit, the converting them into a client, is a little bit more of an art, and there are definitely elements that go into this. And I want to say right up the top that 99% of the reason that they will decide to buy or not has nothing to do with you, especially if you're talking with a business where there's multiple decision makers, or there's budgets at play, or there's like things like the timings of everything. So in fact, let's just kind of like look at some of those reasons why someone might or might not be in a position to buy. So, I mean, I've kind of just already outlined them. Timing is huge. If the timing's right for that business in particular, they might have like a marketing schedule kind of planned out months in advance. So it might be that, they just want to hear more, but then they want to follow up with you, or they want you to follow up with them when they've got space in their marketing calendar. So a lot of it is timing, like, have you got them at the right kind of time? Another big one will be price. We'll talk about that in a second, but, do they have enough budget right now? Are they just kind of curious about budgets, find out what it's going to cost so they can factor it into next year's budget? Or, are they have absolutely no idea how much something like this would cost, and they want to get an idea so they can then pitch it into their kind of managers, or the more senior decision makers? There's loads of different factors. And another massive one, which is in your control, is the product actually right for them? Because it's all well and good that you've hooked them in with this great email or this great call, whatever it is, however they've found you. It's great you've hooked them in, but then you've actually got to have the social proof to be able to kind of prove that your product is right for them. So that could come in the form of your portfolio. Do you have like some really nice case studies? Can you show them something where they go, yes, that is absolutely right for our business. That absolutely is in line with what we want to do. Another thing might come down to, are you a good communicator? Often you'll hear people say that they have business partners because they're not very good at talking to people. And really, if you're going to be in the kind of client service business, you've got to be a good communicator. And it might come down, the reality is it might come down to, do you and that potential client, do you have a good conversation? Are you a great communicator that kind of gives that client the confidence that you'll be really easy to kind of like work with and you'll understand what they want? So, there's a few different factors, and ultimately any one of those factors could be the deciding thing that they don't go with you. And I think it might be a relief for a lot of you listening that a lot of the times when they decide to not go with you, usually it's kind of out of your control. And if they do decide not to kind of pursue it with you, if they decide not to kind of go through with the sale, make sure you understand which one of those factors played into it, because you can always improve. And if it's a case of timing or budget, then you've always got that wiggle room to be able to go back to them. If it's a timeline thing, maybe you suggest, okay, absolutely fine. Why don't we arrange to follow up in a few weeks' time, or next month, or whenever it may be, and then you put a note in the calendar, and then you've already set that expectation that you will be following up. So you're not going to just let that kind of that lead go. If it's a budget thing, then you've got that wiggle room to be able to say, oh well, how about we do a kind of a smaller pilot project? It would cost half the money, or this is when you can kind of use your instincts and decide whether or not this client might be potentially a long-term kind of partner, who might, let's say, for example, I know I use the real estate industry quite often as an example, but it's a good one. If you find like a real estate partner, chances are, or let's say a hotel chain or something like that, chances are there's not just like one, it's not just one video or tour that you'd be doing. It would be multiple. So maybe you start to kind of have a think about like, well, what could you offer this client in terms of like, could you offer them a package deal? Could you, make it look as if you're lowering your price, but actually you're just kind of cleverly thinking about the long-term partnership. So all of these kind of, so it's really important that if they do say, oh, actually, this isn't right for us at the moment, make sure that you drill into why. Okay. But in terms of like how do you give yourself the best chance to convert them? So they're interested, you've arranged a call, because I would always recommend that never, if someone says, yes, I'm interested, in an email and they say, what are your prices? Never, ever, ever reply with prices. Say, you could reply with something like, what could you say? You could say something along the lines of, well, really depends on kind of what there's various different levels, there's various different packages that I offer. Why don't we jump on a quick call so I can understand a little bit more about your business and what you're looking for, and then I can give you a better indication of price. And it might be, and I've had this several times, if a client isn't serious, then they might reply and say, oh, no, to be honest, like I've only got a specific budget, so I'm looking for a specific price or something like that. In which case you can make the decision to say, okay, well, you could reply, but if possible, 99% of the time, you're not going to win work if you just reply to an email like that and say, oh, it's going to be 400 quid or $400 or whatever it is. So I would always try and get them on the phone. Let's have a chat and make sure, again, we talked about this in episode 2, make sure that you are presenting it like you are giving them value. You want to understand their business. It's all about them. It's not about you. It's not about you getting on a call to talk about your services and your products and your virtual tours and your experience. No, it's all about them. I want to understand your business. I want to understand what you want. I want to understand what kind of product would be best fit for your goals. Okay. So then you get them on the phone, and this could be a phone or video chat or however it is that you're kind of, or in-person meeting if we're in a non-COVID world, social distance coffee, whatever it might be. You're with that person. And now the key is, again, It's all about them. So you want to ask them, be curious. People, especially if they're quite high up at a company, they'll be like, especially if it's their own company, they'll love to talk about it. They'll love to, give you the backstory. Be curious. Like, essentially, this is kind of your opportunity to make a really good impression. And I'm gonna tell you something which is gonna come as no surprise to you, but sometimes you just need to hear it. If they like you, there is a very strong chance that they will hire you, even if your work's not that great. I don't know whether you've heard about, I think it's in a Neil Gaiman, the author, in a commencement speech that he did. He talks about like one of his realizations of freelance work. And this is probably going to be a separate episode when I talk about the realities of working for yourself. But the realities are, there's kind of three elements to it. There's three elements to whether you get hired, and you only ever need 2 out of 3. So the client either likes you, you deliver on time, or you deliver really high quality work, but you only ever need 2. So they can like you and deliver on time, and they'll pay, and they don't really mind the kind of quality of the work. You can have high quality work and deliver on time, and maybe they don't like you as much. But really, if they like you and you deliver high quality work, they won't mind like if you're a little bit late delivering, right? So this idea that actually, and I talk about this all the time, but business is a people's game. So if you get on with that person, I'm not suggesting you go in there manipulating them and, turning up the charm to really kind of manipulate them, but just be yourself, be curious. Don't go in there like a sales robot. I think people have this idea of sales and they're like, huh! And like the funniest thing to me is when, and I get this, so I can't tell you how many times I get this when people find out what I do. And not to generalize here, but it tends to be older men who have experience in, or, think that they're big shots because they've had loads of experience in business consultancy or sales. And like within like a couple of sentences of like finding out what I do, like, or maybe someone's introduced us and they kind of say what they do, all they do is bang on about themselves and their own experience. And they're kind of, and I kind of always leave the conversation thinking, wow, that's that old school like sales mentality. That doesn't work anymore. It does not work. I'm telling you now. Maybe it works if like you're speaking to someone who's really, really old school and is fooled easily by someone that basically just bigs themselves up and is really arrogant. But if someone, like if you had a friend that constantly talked about themselves and constantly talked about how good they are and how, would you be their friend? Probably not. So try and think of it that way. So put all the emphasis on the client, all the emphasis on them. Get them to talk about their business. Get them to talk about what their goals are with something like a 360 video or a virtual tour or a VR training experience, whatever it might be. Get them to talk about their goals. Because then all you're doing is collecting data that you can then pitch back to them. So this is the beauty of like listening to someone, is basically you just repackage what they said back to them and they think you're the best because basically they're like, that's exactly what I want. And you're like, in your head, you're thinking, well, yes, that's because that's exactly what you just told me you want. But people are so used to kind of like being talked at with sales or like being told what to do that actually when you use that reverse kind of, it's not even reverse psychology, but it's that reverse tactic on them. It's kind of, so let me give you a tangible example. So I go into let's say I go into a factory and they want a VR training experience, right? This is what we've kind of been talking about over email. They think that it could be a really good fit. They're excited about it. They want me to come in. So I go in and I ask them about the training that they currently do. I ask them about what they're trying to improve. I ask them why like they're thinking about VR and what appeals to them. I ask them like, how it will fit into the larger picture for them. I ask them about their timelines. I even might at that point maybe even ask them about their budgets, but not really, because I know that I want to kind of like set the tone for like how much this is going to cost. So anyway, so once I've asked them all of those things, then I basically could go back to them and say, okay, brilliant. Well, what I'm hearing then is that because you want this to be a training experience that can be delivered to a large group of people at a time, what I would suggest is you go for something more like a 360 video training than a game-based VR training that's interactive, purely because then you can make sure, well, A, it's easier to facilitate because the user has to do less, so the learning curve is a lot less steep, but also it'll be cheaper because you don't have to invest in what we call 6DoF headsets. You could just invest in some 3 Degrees of Freedom headsets. You could repurpose the content and potentially even make it into like 2D training. You will ensure that everyone finishes at the same time because it will be a linear experience rather than interactive, which means it will be easier to program into a wider VR training a wider kind of training program. And you could also use it at events and things like that. So there's a few different reasons why I think that this would be a good fit for you, but that's what I would suggest. And this is kind of also, given your timelines, I would suggest that because it would take a lot less. Also, the kind of training that you've suggested that you want, relies really heavily on kind of like the emotional connection. And I think personally that photorealism is really important with that emotional connection. So having it be photorealistic, which currently isn't as achievable in game-based VR and would be a lot more expensive to be photorealistic. All of these reasons lead me to believe that you would probably benefit from a 360 video training program. So in terms of a budget, that might be XYZ. So basically all I've done there is I've listened to them and I'm pitching them exactly what they want. And then it will come down to timing, budget, all the things we already outlined. But I've given myself the best possible chance to get that work, because if I went into that situation and I said, okay, let me tell you all about myself. So let me tell you, I'm a VR creator. And I think, we could do like VR training, could be anything, right? We could have like a kind of interactive game-based project where people get to like choose their choices, and we could I don't know, have it multi-user, blah, 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 blah. And I'm making all these assumptions and none of it is relevant to them because I'm just speaking jargon. They can't really picture what that might look like. And also I would come to learn that that is absolutely the opposite of what would actually be good for them and be functional, because ultimately, if I just listened in the first place, I would have understood very quickly what kind of thing they'd be looking for. And again, they don't know the technical terms. They can't necessarily visualize, especially if they've not done any VR before, which would be, in that scenario, for example, I would definitely take a VR headset to show them an example of something like a 360 video. Obviously, in a COVID world, you can't necessarily do that remotely, but you want to try and paint them as much of a picture as possible. And the best way to do that is using their own language and using analogies that they will understand. And the best way to do that is to find out about their world in the first place. That's the thing. As a kind of self-employed person, as someone that owns their own business or someone that kind of works for themselves, you have to be an expert in a little bit of everything, right? But you don't need to go and like find out about the intricacies of factory training in order to be able to go into that meeting and kind of know what to say. All you need to do is be a good questioner, a good listener, a person that can like understand the client's needs from their point of view, not from yours. Okay, that's enough for this. I did actually have a cup of tea, just sat here waiting for me. I was going to take a sip and I forgot. I just ranted for 20 minutes instead. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that kind of gives you some ideas about that next phase. Let me know, because I've absolutely loved hearing from you all about the email template and how that's been helping and landing you clients. And, the truth is some people will already know about virtual tours or 360 photos, and they might just go, yep, absolutely, I'm in. How much? When are we going to do it? Quick wins, like brilliant. And if that's the case, fantastic. But more often than not, this is the phase that most people stumble over. So yeah, I hope that helps. Any follow-ups, please let me know. As always, send your questions to AlexMakesVR on Instagram or Twitter, or email me, alexmakesvr@gmail.com. If you want to be reminded daily about when these episodes come out, sign up to the newsletter at alexmakesvr.com. And I'll give you a kind of a rundown and a summary of what's in the episode as well, just in case you don't fancy listening to my voice on that particular day. You can get the tidbits. And with that said, I'll speak to you tomorrow.